I'd like to invite two friends to the stage to make our first award presentation. This is for the Vern Bickel Award. Please welcome Dan Haley, former editorial page editor of the Denver Post and now part of the evil fossil fuel movement with the Colorado Oil and Gas Association, and Chuck Plunkett, who is the current editorial page editor of the Denver Post. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good evening. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. Vern Bickel passed away in August 2000 and left a legacy of community activism, political mentorship, and heroic challenge to political correctness. Often from behind the scenes and without seeking credit, Bickel was the Johnny Appleseed of the economic and personal freedom movement here in Colorado. Vern Bickel provided great financial and personal leadership to the Institute, the Colorado Union of Taxpayers, and the Tabor Amendment.
Tonight, the Independence Institute is honored to present this year's Vern Bickel Award to Vincent Carroll, retired editorial page of the Denver Post.
It always drove me nuts when people dismiss Vince Carroll as some right-wing lunatic. What it told me is that they were a fool who had never read Vince Carroll, because Vince Carroll wasn't about left or right. He wasn't about Republican or Democrat. What Vince Carroll was about was going after hypocrites and liars.
What I've always admired about Vincent Carroll is he has a confidence in his own way of thinking that allows him to have the grace to consider alternate points of view and opposing points of view in a way that he's completely unthreatened by them. You can be talking about how to write an editorial or how to approach a column, and in weighing the various ideas or arguments, Vincent could articulate back points of view that he doesn't even hold, and he could articulate them so well, both in speech and in writing, you'd believe that they sprung right from his own mind. That shows a curiosity about the world, that shows a legitimate desire to understand where somebody else is coming from, that is sadly and sorely lacking in our time, and it's too bad. The world needs more Vincent Carroll.
Vince, you're the best.
Vincent Carroll has been writing commentary on public policy and politics for more than 35 years, in other states and in Colorado, probably most famously for his time at the Rocky Mountain News. When the Rocky Mountain News sadly closed up shop in 2009, the Denver Post was smart enough to bring him on to the editorial page. At that time was my first stint on the editorial page, and I got to know Vincent. And it's been fun watching him win many awards over the years, including the 2014 induction to the Denver Press Club Hall of Fame. So when I first got to know him, one of my first things that we did was we went to see the Rocky Mountain News closing down. Like we snuck into the newsroom to see it all being shuttered. And I remember his stoicism and his sadness over that, but how seriously he poured his passion into making his new role at the Denver Post work out. I was always very impressed with that. Another thing that impressed me about Vincent Carroll was I popped off one time very early about something that some cold-hearted Republican must have been doing. And he said, Republicans aren't cold-hearted. We care about people. And it was a theme of his, and he lived his words. When he would delve into an issue like climate change, he would read about it and think about it very seriously, and he would try to think about, well, what are the impacts, and what are the payoffs, and what are the disadvantages, just the policies that are being advocated. And it was always for the little guy. The bottom line was always about the little guy and how it was going to affect his paycheck and his ability and her ability to raise a family. When I wanted to take over his role when he retired from the Denver Post this July, I remember sitting in front of him and saying, Vincent, I don't think I can do this. This is just too much responsibility. I don't see how you can possibly do it. And he said, Chuck, all you got to do is you got to do your research, you got to get your facts right, you got to state your opinion as well as you can, and then you just fuck it.
Thanks, Chuck. So, Vincent is one of the last survivors of the last great newspaper war in this country. After he single-handedly ran the Rocky Mountain News into the ground in 2009, I was forced to hire him. And when word got out that I had hired him and brought him onto our team, it was as if I had brought Darth Vader onto the Denver Post team. And I told everybody, we got to give him a chance. Quick personal aside, Vincent. He wrote a column a couple years ago. I was at home reading, and I had left the Denver Post. He was writing about his late aunt who had died, and this very accomplished woman. And I remembered hearing some of this, and it sounded familiar. And I went and looked, and sure enough, his aunt, at one point in the 70s, was briefly married to an uncle of mine. And I thought it was very ironic that he was once my crosstown rival when he was at the Rocky Mountain News, then became my colleague at the Denver Post, and now I fondly think of him as my cousin Vinny. In all seriousness, when the Rocky closed, we had a very limited number of people that we could bring to the Post, and Vincent's name was right at the top. Over 27 years of the Rocky, he had built a loyal following of readers, and he did it in the simplest of ways. He told the truth. He wasn't afraid of telling the truth, nor was he afraid of piercing any of the sacred cows that we have here in Colorado. He was fair, and he could lower the boom on a politician or a bad idea better than anyone in town. Vincent is not a bomb thrower like we so often see today. And unlike many columnists, he uses a little trick when he writes. He uses facts, yes, facts, to support his position. I have a theory about what's wrong with the world today, in politics, in the media, and that is that we are lacking adults. Adults are people who hold other people accountable and who hold themselves accountable. We're missing that in media. We're missing that too often in politics. And it's sad that this is the best compliment I can give to somebody, but it is. Vincent was an adult. He was an adult in Denver's media. When he said something was so, it was so, and we believed him. So please congratulate Vincent Carroll for winning the Vern Bickel Award. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I still remember Dan calling me after the Rocky Mountain News died, and we met semi-surreptitiously at a coffee shop down in Denver, and of course other people saw us. But Dan, you know what I especially remember is how after I signed that contract, what my pay would be, that somehow, what was it, a month after I came on board, we had to lower the salary.
Sorry about that.
Because of cutbacks in the Denver Post newsroom. Yeah, that was one of many disappointments to come. But anyway, when John called me, John Caldera, when he called me, I don't know, 6 weeks ago or whenever, asked me whether I'd be willing to accept the award, because I'd always shied away from associating too closely with the Independence Institute while I was a working journalist, lest my reputation be even more sullied than it had been. But, and John understood this, and I said, well, John, who's received this award? And he listed all the people, and I said, you know, I'm going to be by far the most moderate guy you've ever given this award to. Maybe you ought to, politically, you may want to think this over. But I said yes, and then I started thinking about it, and in fact, there are huge areas in which, even though I have had my policy disagreements with the Independence Institute analyses, and certainly some tactical disagreements, John, but better left unspoken. But, you know, overall, in terms of a commitment to economic liberty, there's a huge overlap and a huge shared interest. In terms of educational choice, not just charters, which I've been advocating as long as the Independence Institute, and I do give them credit for their great work in that regard, but as well as experiments in private school vouchers in places like Douglas County, we're on the same page. We're on the same page in terms of resisting the ever-grasping advance of the regulatory state, and I have no quarrel generally with the independence attitude there. We're on the same page in terms of deploring the kinds of gratuitous taxpayer subsidies for things like rich film directors from Hollywood who come here and get benefits. Independence Institute has done good work in that area, and I think I've done contributed some modest efforts as well. And just generally in terms of, and I was thinking of this when I get an email from John, he's got some saying somewhere talking about freedom, and he talked about it tonight. But that is my default position from which I work when I'm analyzing policy. And I've told people who've worked for me over the years, both at the Rocky Mountain News and the Denver Post, or who have worked with me, who are reporters, who are on editorial board meetings involving public officials. And my default position in analyzing stuff is that we should go with the position that provides the most liberty to individuals. That's not to say that you're always going to end up there, but that's the default position. That's my worldview, because I believe people prosper both economically and in terms of happiness and in terms of self-fulfillment most when they do have the most liberty. And so to the extent that I do believe the Independence Institute contributes substantially to the effort to promote liberty and freedom in Colorado, I'm very pleased to accept this award tonight. Thank you.